Best friend's boyfriend turns up everywhere I go, and now I'm questioning reality, fearing to lose her friendship and my peace. Over the past school year, I found myself growing unexpectedly close to Rory Tweniff. We'd always been friendly, but recently, our shared activities pulled us closer together and I started to feel like I could really call her a friend. It was during those first few weeks that I discovered Rory had a boyfriend, Logan Tweniff, and I remember being surprised because, out of all the random coincidences, he went to the same high school I attended. Still, I laughed it off at first, a classic case of small world. As the semester unfolded, both Rory and I got way more involved: student government, the student paper, late night debrief that bled into our personal lives. Before I knew it, I was inviting her to my close group's hangouts, excited by the fact that she fit in so well. During one of those hangouts, we finally met Logan. He was polite, nothing remarkable at first. But ever since that night, something started to unsettle me. It's hard to even describe, maybe because it sounds so insane when I run it through my own head, but suddenly Logan was everywhere I went. Not just at the usual campus haunts, but at my favorite cafe where I studied, at grocery stores I'd mentioned to friends in passing, at little parts of the city nobody ever has a reason to just bump into someone. Campus is huge, so huge that I can go weeks without running into some of my best friends, unless we plan it. Yet now, no matter where I planned to be, Logan would turn up, casual and friendly, but always watching. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but it kept happening. No matter how friendly his demeanor, I couldn't shake the sick, knot and feeling in my stomach every time he looked at me. There's just something about the way he watches me that makes my skin crawl, like I'm being scrutinized or monitored. I started feeling anxious about going to my regular spots at all, glancing over my shoulder and hurrying through my errands, irrational as it sounds. What troubles me most is that I don't know whether to say anything to Rory. I don't want to come off as paranoid, much less as a homewrecker, and the last thing I want is to hurt the really beautiful friendship we've developed. But every day this weighs on me a bit heavier, and I don't know how to broach it or if I even should. Right now, I'm at a crossroads. Should I talk to Rory? Should I start checking for trackers, cut back on anything I post online, change my routes, or avoid places I love just so I won't see him again? Part of me wonders if I'm imagining things, but my instincts just won't let me ignore it. I hate that I've started feeling afraid to go outside or to be in my own favorite places because my friend's boyfriend is always there, always watching. I feel trapped between wanting to believe I'm just being paranoid and worrying that something much stranger is going on. I was so stressed out I didn't leave my house all Thursday, paralyzed with anxiety and unsure how to move forward. But today, I finally mustered the courage to confront Rory. I texted her that I wanted to discuss Wednesday's agenda, and we agreed to meet in the dorm room of a mutual friend who's also part of student government and, crucially, someone who already knew what was happening from my side. An hour went by with me nervously fiddling and trying to find the right way to bring up the subject. Finally, remembering some advice I'd read, I told Rory that I kept seeing Logan in nearly every place I'd been lately. At first, the conversation was calm, but when I pressed her about how weird it was that Logan kept popping up every week, her expression changed. Suddenly, she demanded if I was trying to accuse her boyfriend of being gay. That caught me completely off guard. Yes, I'm gay, but it was bizarre that she immediately jumped to that conclusion. I rushed to clarify that I wasn't accusing him of anything, just stating what I'd observed. I told her about the CAF incident, how I'd only told her I would be there, and yet Logan showed up. I asked if he'd asked about my whereabouts. That's when things got heated. Rory admitted that Logan did ask her where I'd be, but insisted it was just the behavior of a concerned boyfriend keeping tabs on his girlfriend hanging out with another guy, not a stalker. I tried to tell her that, from my perspective, it came off as stalkerish, and she got angry once again, insisting that I was accusing Logan of being interested in me and, for the second time, of being gay. The conversation devolved, voices got loud and messy, and our mutual friend had to step in and break it up. Rory stormed out. Once she had left, I asked my friend if I was overreacting. She told me that regardless of my gender or orientation, men have stalkers too, and she'd support me if Rory ever tried to accuse me of anything. I reached out to my closest friends as well, and they reassured me everyone knew I was out and open about being gay, which makes it weird for Logan to see me as any kind of threat to his relationship. Now, I'm here in my apartment, turning everything over in my head. Am I taking all of this the wrong way? Would a guy really go to these lengths to keep tabs on one of his girlfriend's friends? I'm at my wit's end, but I'm trying not to spiral because the people who matter, my friends, my family, have my back. I don't know how all of this will unfold, but I'd appreciate any advice. Thank you for the comforting words and the advice. It honestly means the world to me. Right now, I can't fully cut ties with Rory or Logan, even after everything that's happened. The semester isn't over until mid-April, and I'm tied up with year-end responsibilities for student government and the university paper. Thankfully, I have other friends in both organizations, and I absolutely plan to stick close to them until the semester's over just in case things get any worse. Once again, thank you all for your support. Update 2. I thought giving it a few quiet days would cool everything, but it escalated in a way I wasn't prepared for. Friday night I stayed late at the paper with 2 editors, grinding through layout. It was close to midnight when we finally killed the lights and walked out. The hallway was mostly dark, just those emergency strips, and at the end by the staircase someone was standing in the glow of a vending machine. It took me a second to place him because of the lighting, but it was Logan, hands in his pockets, staring like he was reading the flyers on the corkboard and not reading anything at all. He didn't come toward us. He didn't say anything. The second my friend said his name, he ducked down the stairs. We heard the outside door and then nothing. One of the editors grabbed my sleeve and pulled me back into the newsroom, shaking. We locked the door, turned the lights back on and called campus safety. They got there fast, took our statements, and one of them recognized his name from my report earlier in the week. I didn't sleep. Every set of headlights in the parking lot below my apartment was him. Every footstep in the hallway was him rethinking his exit and coming back. By morning, I had an email from the Title Roman 9 office asking to meet. I took the photos my friend snapped when he was at the end of the hallway, the timestamps, the screenshots of the CAF test, and told them everything I remembered. They didn't make me prove how scared I felt, they could see it. By Monday afternoon, they'd issued a no-contact directive. He couldn't talk to me, text me, show up where I was by design. If he did, it would turn into a disciplinary thing he could not run. About an hour after I was told the directive went out, I got a text from an unknown number with my full first and last name spelled out in a way that made it look foreign to me. He wrote a paragraph that read like he thought he was being reasonable, some warped version of "I wanted to make sure you weren't hurting Rory, you show up where she is all the time, of course I'm going to be there," and then one line that punched me in the throat: "I remember you from high school." He listed the mascot, the color of our senior shirts, and a blink and you miss it detail from a charity drive I ran that only people who actually went would remember. I stared at that text for a long time thinking, so it was never a small world joke, it was a blueprint. I didn't answer. I forwarded it straight to Title Roman 9 and safety, blocked the number, and went to a friend's place. I figured I'd hole up there for a few days and let myself breathe. 20 minutes later there was a knock at my friend's door. It was Rory. She didn't come in swinging like last time. She looked wrecked. She started talking immediately, like if she paused I'd close the door on her. She told me that after our argument, she and Logan had a huge fight. He'd taken her phone to prove something and, while she watched, opened a folder on his laptop with my name on it. Screenshots of my public socials going back years. A pin map with places I go circled my CAF, the bogia across from the CAF, the grocery store I like because the produce people bag things gently. Notes under the circles: Wednesdays, post-meeting, usually alone, brings notebook. There was a photo of me and my friends leaving the student paper office one night in February that made my skin prickle because I hadn't known anyone was behind us then, either. She told me he had her log where I would be if we were together. Not just if, but how long we stayed and where we went next. She said he called it pattern mapping, and I watched her mouth form the words like she was still trying to convince herself it wasn't as bad as it sounded. He had also, she said, logged things from our shared calendar: student government office hours, paper meetings, committee events, anything that made me a dot on a map he could anticipate. When she said that, something ugly and silent in me finally sat down. It wasn't a feeling, it was a fact. I kept thinking of that moment in the dorm where she leapt to accusing me of calling him gay, how it had felt like it came from nowhere. It didn't. She admitted he'd been obsessed with the idea that I'd test him, because of me being out, because of high school rumors he'd never entangled from his own head. He'd gone digging for me not because we shared a school but because he recognized my face from those days and couldn't let go of whatever story he'd been telling himself since he was 17. Rory said she was done. She said the folder broke whatever rationalization she'd been clinging to about protective versus possessive. She was scared, which I understood now in a way I hadn't been letting myself get to with her. She asked if I would come with her to get her stuff from his place because the idea of going in alone made her stomach flip. I told her we weren't doing anything alone. We called campus safety and asked them to meet us there. They walked us up to his off-campus apartment just as the sun was going down. Somewhere in the middle of gathering blankets and a box of old notebooks, I opened the wrong cabinet. It wasn't like in a movie. There wasn't a creepy shrine, no red string on a bulletin board, but there was a neat stack of printouts and a legal pad with dates and arrows and handwriting I recognized from the single time he'd scribbled his number on a napkin for Rory. My name was at the top of the page, underlined twice. The officer with us quietly asked me if he could take photos. I nodded and kept packing with my eyes on the carpet because even looking at the paper made my face feel hot. We were almost finished when the elevator dinged and Logan stepped out into the hallway. He saw me, then saw the officer, and everything about him stiffened like he was trying to backspace his body out of the scene. The officer stood in front of the door and told him about the directive. Logan looked at me like if he could just explain, this would all reset. I didn't say anything. Rory did he hint, neither. He took a step forward and the officer put a hand up. Logan swallowed hard, nodded, and then did something I didn't expect. He turned his head toward Rory and said, low enough that I only caught it because I was close, you can't tell them about high school. The elevator doors opened again, and he got in. After we left, Safety walked us to Rory's new place in a different dorm and told us to text if anything felt even slightly off. I sat on her floor while she folded a pile of clothes into drawers that weren't familiar, listening to the muffled sounds of someone else's Netflix through the wall, and tried to put names to the feelings tearing through me. Relief is too clean a word. I felt like my nervous system had been running a marathon behind my back and someone had finally told me the distance. This morning, the dean of students emailed me and asked to swing by the paper before our editorial meeting. She closed her door, sat across from me, and told me another thing I wasn't ready for. Logan had filed a complaint accusing me of harassment and of trying to break them up. The no-contact directive and the pile of evidence we handed over made it a non-starter, but it still hit a place in me that hates being watched and hates being lied about the same. She said documentation was our friend and that if anything else happened, they'd move to a full campus ban. I haven't seen him since the hallway with the vending machine, not properly. Twice I'd had the feeling again, anyone who's felt it knows it. It's like your ribs are a xylophone and someone runs a mallet down them, and both times it was nothing, just a kid in a similar jacket or a guy with the same gait. I'm not ready to call that peace, but it's something like air. Rory and I are speaking in a way that feels careful and honest in equal measure. We're not pretending it didn't happen, we're not pretending we can go right back. She handed me a flash drive tonight with photos of his log and the folder he showed her, and then she sat on my couch until midnight, crying the slow, quiet cry of someone excavating the first layer of denial and finding a city underneath. I don't know what he meant by the high school thing he threw at her in the hallway. I don't know if it was anything or just another hook he thought might work. The part of me that always wants the clean arc and the tidy answer is learning to live without either right now. What I do know is that I'm not imagining any of it anymore. And even if I never get the why from his mouth, I have the what laid out in ink, in his own handwriting, and for once that makes me feel safer than the dark did. Update 3. I thought the quiet would keep stretching if I didn't jinx it by saying it out loud, and then Tuesday morning my phone lit up with a sound I'd never heard before and a banner that didn't make sense at first: unknown AirTag moving with you. I was walking to office hours with Rory, hands wrapped around a coffee that had already gone cold, and we both just stopped on the sidewalk like we hit a glass wall. I don't own any Apple tags. She doesn't either, or didn't, we thought. We stood there in that strip of shade between the library and the business school, a little island of leaves blown into the corner, and watched the dot on my screen hop with every step we took. We didn't go to office hours. We went to campus safety. They had us empty our bags on a table that had seen too many Red Bulls and not enough sleep. The officer, who'd walked us to Logan's place last week, put on blue gloves and went slow. He held Rory's tote by the straps like it might startle and bolt if he grabbed it wrong. There's a tiny interior pocket in there where she keeps her chapstick and a wadded napkin she swears has survived 3 seasons. Under the lining, near the seam, something made a dull sound when his knuckle tapped it. He took a box cutter and slid the blade beneath a few threads. When he lifted the fabric, there it was, a $50 of white plastic, the Apple logo like a dropped eyelash. Neither of us said anything. We both just looked at it and then at each other and then at our shoes. He sealed it in a bag, sharpied the time and date without looking up, and when he finally did, he had that face people get when there's a word they want to use that paperwork doesn't love. He asked if we'd mind if he checked Rory's backpack and the other purses she grabbed when we moved her. By the time he was done, there were 2 on the table. Rory made a small sound I've only ever heard people make when their bodies decide to panic faster than their heads. She remembered something that made the back of my neck go hot, a white box he'd set on his desk over winter break with a clean Apple photo on it, a 4-pack you buy because it's a deal. She didn't think about it then beyond the low-grade irritation of someone else always having a new gadget. Later that night, she scrolled through screenshots she'd taken months ago of him being irritating in little ways. The blurred photo of the box was in the batch. We forwarded it to safety and to Title Roman 9 and to the detective the dean had looped in after the hallway. It felt, finally, like going from weird to crime in the eyes of a machine bigger than any of us. By Wednesday afternoon, The no contact directive wasn't the only thing in place. The conduct office sent him an interim campus ban with language I read 3 times because even the font felt like a weight lifting. No buildings, no events, no residence halls, no paper office, no nothing. A city officer sat with me in a room whose thermostat is set to waiting room in a dentist's office. Explained that tracking without consent is a charge where we are, and asked if I wanted to go for a civil harassment prevention order that would sit outside the university bull. My mouth said yes before whatever part of me still thinks don't make trouble could offer its stale argument. The hearing is not like TV. It's fluorescent light and the sound of shoes on a floor that needs waxing and a judge who looks like she's had every version of every story on these benches in front of her 100 times. Rory sat next to me so small I thought if a breeze came in under the door she'd lift. Logan was there with his jaw locked in a folder he kept opening and closing, like maybe if he shuffled the papers enough one of them would turn into a different story. He talked when it was his turn and said the things I knew he'd say: concern, protection, miscommunication. He kept putting these qualifiers in front of words like if he could just line them up right, the logic would click into place and the judge would look up and see not what he did but what he meant. And then he said high school. He said my name and he said the year and he said I had humiliated him once by not answering a DM. He described a day I only half remember, a lunchtime meeting about that charity drive I ran in a cafeteria that always smelled like bleach and pizza, like it had scored a groove in him we all been walking by without knowing. His voice did a quiet, careful thing when he got to that part, the way someone does when they're handing you a glass you can't see. I don't know if it matters that I never saw the DM. I don't know if it matters that I wouldn't have known him then if we passed on the same patch of hallway. The judge cared about the last 3 months and the 3 years of high school only as far as they explained the first. She looked at the photos and the email and the log and the airbags and the fact that there was a directive in place that a stranger with a badge had to say slowly to him in a hallway with a vending machine. She asked me 2 questions and asked Rory 3 and looked at Logan with something like a frown when he tried to talk over his own sentence. The order slid across the table with the same small sound every paper makes. 1 year. Stay away. No contact. If he violates it, it's hip steps I don't have to memorize because someone else will read them to him. I went home and did the thing where your body kind of runs a systems check you didn't know you'd authorized. My hands buzzed. My jaw ached like I'd been chewing something 4 days. I walked around my apartment touching dumb objects: light switch, sink, drawer handle like a pilgrim. Rory came over with a bag of clementines and sat on my floor unpeeling 3 in a row. We didn't talk about high school at first. She asked if she could plug her phone in and I showed her the outlet, not because she needed direction but because it was something to do with my arm. Later, I pulled my old Google Drive out of retirement and clicked into a folder I haven't opened since senior year. Photos from that charity drive crowded the screen. I zoomed in on one and then another because my brain told me to, even if I didn't know why, and in the background of one, behind a stack of canned beans and a poster with a mascot drawn wrong because my friend never could get the ears right, there's a kid standing with his shoulders set like he's not quite sure what to do with his hands. I would have scrolled past him 1,000 times. Now I can't unsee the angle of his jaw. I texted a friend from back then, the one who did yearbook with me and who remembers, always, the weird little bits no one else holds on to. He sent me a screenshot of a 6-year-old email chain with a subject line that made my chest feel small: Senior Spotlight Times. A Gmail address I didn't recognize had written, "When is my name free for photos? I want to make sure I don't miss him." He hadn't responded. He'd forgotten it until I asked. These are not smoking guns, they are matchbooks shaking in a pocket. The officer who took the airbag down to evidence told me pattern again, and I heard it now, not as a thing said to inflate his cleverness but as something a person says when they built a tiny universe around an idea and cannot live outside its weather. The dean called this morning to tell me the interim suspension went through and he withdrew. There's always an administrative word that makes hard edges sound soft. He withdrew. Like the tide, like a pencil, like putting a hand back into a coat sleeve and walking away. I keep thinking there should be one last big scene where the music swells and the lights dim and a curtain drops on a fixed meaning. Instead it's this: last night I was leaving the paper late again, different editors, same dead fluorescent hum, and I got that feeling like my rabs were an instrument. I stood still and it faded like a bad radio station. A campus police car idled at the curb, the same officer from the tote bag afternoon inside doing a crossword, and I realized I was breathing with my whole lung instead of the top half. Rory texted me a photo of the new plant her roommate put on the windowsill, and then, a minute later, a second text: "He's blocked on everything. If I'd ever ask you to remind me why, send me a picture of the inside of that pocket." I screenshotted the order and sent it back anyway because ink is more stubborn than memory some days. I don't know if I'll ever know what Exactly, he meant by high school beyond what I saw in that drive folder and the way his voice changed around the word. I don't know if I want the version that lives in his head. What I have now is louder and quieter her at once, a piece of paper that says the law agrees with my nervous system, the knowledge that if he tries again there's a step that isn't mine to take, and a morning where the calf window threw a rectangle of sun on my notebook and the only person who noticed me notice it was the barista who wrote my name right without asking. That's the most I can ask of a day, and it answered. Update 4. I wanted the next new thing to be a nothing sort of thing, a boring committee slot filled, a headline changed at the last second, a coffee that wasn't burned. Instead, it was the kind of new you feel before you can name it. We were in the paper office arguing with the printer, which had started doing that baked plastic smell it gets when it pretends to have a jam, when our photo editor slid a couch away from the wall to get to the outlet we always overload. Something small and black was plugged into the power strip, flush against the carpet, easy to miss if you weren't on your knees. Someone said, "Whose charger is this?" But it wasn't a charger. It looked like a charger, the kind of block you'd borrow for 10 minutes and forget to return, except it had a pinhole that wasn't a seam and, when our editor twisted it, a fingernail-sized card half slid out and then back in like a held breath. My body did the thing I'm starting to recognize as not intuition but memory heat on the back of my neck, the map of the room getting suddenly crisped, like I could tell you where the scratch on the table leg is by heart. We didn't touch it again. We called safety. The same officer from the tote bag afternoon walked in, glanced where we were all looking, and didn't ask a question first. He put gloves on. He eased it out of the strip and turned it between his fingers like it might be the lid of a snake jar. If it had been nothing, he would have said it. He didn't. He bagged it, asked us to back up, and kept his voice low in that way people do when the true thing and the official thing are fighting behind their teeth. A detective I hadn't met came, the kind with a notebook that looks like it's been to too many kitchens and stairwells, and asked who had keys, how long the couch had been against that wall, whether any of us had seen a tiny red light at night that we thought was the printer cycling or the router having a mood. I said February out loud by accident, like the month itself was evidence. They came back the next day with their own plug and a laptop and played one of the files for us in a room that had a taped-on sign saying interview, which made me hate the door a little before I even sat down. It wasn't a gotcha movie reveal. There wasn't audio. It was a rectangle of our couch from an angle just high enough to catch anyone walking in after hours. You could see people's knees. You could see the poster of last year's homecoming with the tape curling off the corner. You could see me and two editors that night with the vending machine glow, heads bent, my stupid sweatshirt with a ripped cuff. The timestamp matched. Another clip was empty room, then someone's backpack set down and the edge of a sleeve you could convince yourself belonged to anybody if you needed it to. The block had been there at least since January. They said that part carefully, like what they were really naming was all the time we had spent sitting in front of a piece of plastic that was swallowing us onto a card. Two things happened like dominoes after that. The first was simple. They went to a judge and got a different piece of paper than the one we already had. The detective said search warrant the way you say a word you've said to people who already know what it means. His jacket creaked when he moved. The second was there's always a word for this in a report, third-party contact, which sounds surgical. A manila envelope with my byline handwritten on it got slid under the paper office door at 7:15 a.m. The morning after they pulled the block. Inside was a photocopy of a yearbook page, ours, class list on the left, the mascot in a corner with the ears wrong the same way my friend always drew them wrong, and my senior photo traced over in blue pen. There wasn't a no. The Dropbox camera across from our door caught a blur of a hoodie in a grocery store tote with a red logo. The detective called the tote store, the way people do in TV shows that makes you roll your eyes, except when the store is 2 blocks away and the clerk has a good memory because she hates the new bag handles and complains to every person who buys one. Sometimes the kind of thing actually turns into a thread. The clerk remembered him. The boy who wouldn't stop talking about how a ban wasn't the same as a law, she said, like she was repeating a line a bee had put straight into her ear. They executed the warrant that afternoon. While I was moving the section around for the 4th time to make room for a story about a dining hall closure, my phone lit up with a text from the detective that was shorter than how it felt. We have him in custody. He didn't say arrested even though that's what the word was. I waited to be told to come down and point at things. Instead, they asked Rory first. He kept an Amazon box with the same fake charger in a closet, empty packaging and one spare still, it's plastic. The order confirmation had his name on it and the 4-pack photo with a clean apple from winter break staring up at us from my brain. They found a roll of double-sided tape and a printout of our office key schedule like someone had taken a photo of the whiteboard last semester and brought it home with them to domesticate it. They didn't make me look at everything. I think maybe there's a kindness that grows on law enforcement like lichen when they do this particular type of work long enough. What they did show me was small and uncinematic and worse for it, a legal pad with my name at the top, underlined twice, arrows from dates to paper office couch and stairwell and Wednesdays. In another notebook, between a class schedule scribble and a grocery list with the word cumin circled, was a list of names from high school, mine twice. He'd written Spotlight? With a question mark like a pebble next to it. The detective asked if I wanted to see the room where the airbag pack photo had been taken or the place they found the spare. I told him it didn't matter. It all looked the same from the inside of my ribs. Rory's part in all of this, she was white around the mouth the way people are when their blood has too much to do. He had texted her from a new number that morning with a sentence that could have fooled someone with fewer mornings in their bones. Can you get him to hear me? It was enough, even without the tote or the box or the undercover block, for the piece of paper the judge slid toward us last week to stop being just a promise and turn into a rule with teeth. The detective said the phrase violation of order like it lived on the tip of his tongue all day. They booked him. I learned how quickly the words booking photo appear on a screen when you are not related to the person taking them and have no right to know what their face looked like under that light. He asked for bail. The judge looked at the list again, the airtags, the no contact, the envelope, the charger, each thing small enough to fit in a pocket and, added together, a house. She said it with a number my head doesn't know how to feel about. He did in post. That night, for the first time in what feels like a season and a half, I slept without dreaming that my front door was a mouth someone else had the key to. High school did not stop at the courthouse door like I wanted. A woman with a voice that sounded exactly like the guidance counselor's office soft, worried about the test you have in 5th period, left me a voicemail after one of the detectives called her. She said she remembered him as the boy who brought a camera to every pep rally and never wrote the captions he promised, someone who was always almost involved. She said there had been a thing senior spring where 3 messages went out from a fake club account asking for photos of Spotlight seniors and she'd shut it down because it made her uneasy, not because she could prove anything. She said my name was on a list she found in the trash outside the media lab and she felt sick even telling me that now. I walked around my kitchen while she talked and touched the same 2 cabinet handles 3 times, like that could turn her sentences into something that happened to someone else. This afternoon, the dean sat in our office with her hands around a mug she didn't drink from and used the word closure in a way I think was more aspirational than descriptive. The conduct process at the university will keep moving even though he withdrew. The city charges are separate and will move, too. She told me there's a counseling center group that meets on Thursdays for people who have had their lives rearranged by someone else's idea of them. I said yes in that automatic way my mouth has learned when offered anything that makes the edges of my day softer. Rory squeezed my wrist under the table so lightly I almost thought I'd imagined it. The printer in the corner made the same fake jam noise and then, finally, pulled a page through straight. Outside, someone had chalked midterms in giant block letters across the quad and a girl in a yellow coat was hopping over them like they were cracks. I walked to the caf with my head up because I could. The barista spelled my name right again. The sun hit the table in a rectangle that moved so slowly I could measure 3 sips by it. I am not Navi enough to think there's a curtain drop now, that the lights go out and score swells. But there is a very fine difference my body knows now awaiting that it is mine, not his. The order sits on my desk like a book you keep reading because your hands don't know what else to do. The couch in the office is back against the wall, the power strip is empty except for what it's supposed to hold, and if a small red light shows up again, it will have a new meaning, we will see it. We will name it. And it will not be allowed to say,